Hello and welcome to the newest episode of the Dino Show, or Dino, wherever you want to call it, live from Media Hub on RiotRadio.ca. My name's Eldin today. I'm not wearing the head, but it is here. I'm going to try it without it for once and see what happens. Now, I've been off for a couple weeks now. Just took some time. I got really busy with work, but I'm happy to be back, and I hope you are happy I'm here too, because we're talking about more dinosaurs, and we've got 3 more to talk about today. Now, we're kind of getting through the Edmonton period. We had Edmontonia last week. Now we have Edmontosaurus this week. And Edmontosaurus was one of my favorite dinosaurs as a kid. Seeing that it was from Edmonton was crazy. Its name just translates to Edmonton lizard. I got my sources from the UK Discovery Dinosaur thing that I usually get from Wikipedia, which actually did a good job, and Prehistoric Wildlife, which is like my go-to for all of my researches. Now, it was named Edmontosaurus by Lawrence Lamb in 1917. Like many of the dinosaurs found before the turn of the 1990s, it was actually found and classified under a different name. And that was in 1892. And then even before that, it was found originally in 1871 by Edward Drinker Cope. But as paleontology kind of goes and comes along, you kind of learn more about it and we rename and change things. It happens, you make mistakes, especially in the 1800s when we thought Protoceratops was a griffin. So it happens. So it was found in Alberta and Saskatchewan, as well as Montana, South Dakota, and Wyoming. And the supposed range was so vast, covering most of North America, from Colorado to Alaska, which is a huge swath of land. When you think about that, think about this migration, right? You think, wildebeest move far. This would be insane. Now, it was probably living towards, I think there was an inland sea at this time as well. It was probably living towards the coast and coastal plains. And it's a big dinosaur too. So it's in the family of, if I can find where I put it here, it's Hadrosauridae, like iguanodons. And iguanodons also probably migrated as well. Now, it lived during the Cambrian, or the late Cambrian of the Maastrichtian of the Cretaceous, about 73 million years ago, while Edmontosaurus regalius was 73. Edmontosaurus anaceton lived about 66 million years ago. So one of the last of its family. The time period of 66 million years ago would mean that anaceton would have lived alongside of dinosaurs like Triceratops, T-Rex, Ankylosaurus, and some of the late ones before that final extinction kicked in. In the family of Hadrosauridae, as I said, it was big. So realistically, it was a big dinosaur. And there was kind of an argument about it where they thought that regalius and anaceton were so much different in size, but they really weren't. So funny enough, it's shown that anaceton was much smaller than the two. But after some research, it's been proven that the two actually were very similar in size. They weren't crazy differences. They were very similar sized, and they were big dinosaurs too. They ranged about 9 to 12 meters. And in this, again, this is an older one, where regalius looks tiny, but it's not. They're supposedly the same size. So adults range from 9 to 12 meters long, about 39 feet, with the largest discovered being about 13 meters, which is approximately 41 feet or 42 feet, and weighing up to 5.6 metric tons, or 6.2 short tons. Short tons, I believe, is, I haven't looked it up yet. I'm pretty sure it's British comparatively. Now, the crazy thing is, this family also had a lot of synonyms. When it was first discovered, it was kind of given a lot of names that weren't actually it. So it was called Anatosaurus, Anatotitan, Cliosaurus, Anceton, Edmontosaurus saskatchewanense, Hadrosaurus longiceps, Thespius saskatchewanense, and Trachodon longiceps. All these names, same dinosaur. They were all synonymous. So all these names have now been put together and been actually, it was its own dinosaur. And all these dinosaur names that were thrown in together were kind of thrown in after it had already been named. So when you take a dinosaur name and you add, or you say it's a new species, let's change the name. Realistically, the first name it was given, sort of, or the first scientifically proven name, is what it's stuck with. So Edmontosaurus is its name, for good or for worse, we're stuck with it. Now, the two species I said, similar sized, we found multiple specimens and fossils, including almost complete skulls and postcranial skeletons, so postcranial being from behind the skull, as well as some mummified soft tissue and soft tissue impressions on rocks, which is really cool because then you can actually see what it looked like. So you see, like when you see its body, you see its skin, it doesn't look feathered because we don't think it was feathered, but it looks more like reptilian, or I guess not. Yeah, but like we think it had actually big, large scales like it is here, which is incredible, and like a little tiny crest. Now, I've talked about Hadrosauridae before, and Paralophosaurus, which we'll talk about eventually, I believe. Huge crests. That little dinky thing, not doing much. Lambeosaurid, Lambeosaurus had huge crests. This thing, not so much. Corythosaurus, which we talked about, also had a huge crest. This thing did not. So, unlike the large-crested Lambeosaurus, as I said, members of the Hadrosaurian family didn't have a large crest. Instead, they had like a smaller, solid crest or somewhat of a fleshy comb, like a chicken. Picture a dinosaur with a little floppy comb, which kind of makes it interesting when you think about it, because like they're the same species, sort of, but also very vastly different now. Like others in the family, and this is a really cool thing, it was supposed that they migrated. Now, when you think of a range from Colorado to Alaska, that's a huge, huge range. And I looked it up just to kind of figure out the largest terrestrial animal today, or I guess the terrestrial migration for animals today is caribou, which migrate all across the Arctic, or if you're looking at Russia, all across Russia. This would be bigger. If they migrated, this would be so much longer. This range would be insane. Now, it's argued, though, that they weren't actually migratory, and there were more, like, different subgroups living in these areas, because of two reasons. One of the best is that the ones found in the polar region, so towards the north, I guess, Northwest Territories and Alaska area, they looked more distinct than others. So it didn't make sense that they'd migrate and come up and then be like, hey, we'll go back down. They probably did migrate at one point, and then they just hung out. They say, hey, the food's good here, we're going to hang out. It would be hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers, though, if they did migrate this way, which is insane when you think about it. Like, it's a huge trek. So we think that these groups are all distinct in their own things, like little subgroups here and there. As I mentioned at the start of the profile, this Edmontosaurus, it had fallen under so many hats that all of these hats now are down to one hat. It lost all these different names, and now it's just one by himself, which is kind of crazy. And the long history is that, like, for the longest time, there's so much going on. I'm not going to talk about it because there's so many, like, distinct things about this dinosaur that were kind of thrown in. It's a lot to talk about, and I try to keep this, like, short form to 20 minutes or more or less. So that's kind of the end of Edmontosaurus. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a beautiful dinosaur. I really enjoyed it. And the next one is a very well-known one as well, Euoplocephalus, which I'm pretty sure I killed the name on, I hope. It is an ankylosaurid, so in the family of Ankylosaurus, as this little guy with the club tail looks. Now, it was discovered by Lawrence Lamb. If it's Canadian, it's probably Lawrence Lamb or Cope, or one of the other guys I mentioned last week. There's only like a big 3 or 4. Discovered by Lawrence Lamb, first in 1897 on August 18th, and then named in 1910. So it didn't have a name for 13 years, but it's okay. 13 years. It was found in Alberta at the Dinosaur National Park, or I guess Dinosaur Park, which is now known as, and the Horseshoe Canyon. And there was another specimen discovered in 1902 that led to the holotype of the species. So holotype is like the number one. When you look at a holotype, that is like the first skeleton that they decided this is the dinosaur. So holotype 1902, they're like, hey, this is the dinosaur, we're going to go with it. It was originally thrown into like a throwaway category, as we call them, called Stegosauri, which is basically the name for all armored dinosaurs around the 1900s. By 1917, though, Charles Whitney Gilmore assigned it to the family Ankylosauridae, like Ankylosaurus, which is the holotype of the name. Pretty cool dinosaur. I have no pictures of how big it looked towards humans, because the one I found was really bad quality. And Dan tried his best, but we can't fix bad quality if I find it. So there's no size to show how big a person is, but trust me, it's big. It was about 6 meters long and up to 2,000 kilograms, or 2 tons. And that would approximately be, like, at the shoulder, it'd be probably tall towards my height, so about 5 foot, 6 foot tall. Pretty cool. Now, it was also found in the Montana Formation in the Judith River, but we don't really count that because, again, we're not in the States. In the family of Ankylosauridae, it is one of the best preserved and important of the family from the huge number of remains attributed to its name. So it's found tons of names. It's all over the place. Really important species to have. Now, unlike Nodosaurs, which is another part of the family, like Edmontonia, which we talked about last week, and Nodosaurus, which... We'll talk about Nodosaurus eventually. We'll never talk about Nodosaurus. So Nodosaurus you'll never hear about. But they're kind of cool. I talked about Edmontonia last week. Check it out. It had this giant head. So its head was wider than it was long. So it had this little like snub nose and a huge mouth with like a beak and tons of teeth, a beaky-like thing. It's like a hard palate. And with that, it would allow it to be a generalized grazer. So what that means is you get this big head. It's really heavy. You can't keep it up all the time. So when you're down towards the ground, you want to try to eat everything you can. And with that big mouth of it, it could just eat what it wanted. It really didn't matter. It could do its own thing. It wouldn't have to be specialized. Again, the rule of thumb is generalists always survive longer than specialists because generalists can eat and do whatever they have to survive. Now, in a strange twist, it also had this great big nasal capacity, like huge nasal passage, which we didn't. You don't see that in dinosaurs. You see it in mammals. And people were like, oh, it had a great sense of smell. It must have been able to smell everything. It's like a basset hound. And then we kind of looked at it and we're like, oh, the brain, the part in the brain called the olfactory region, which all like smell, it wasn't really there. So it had a big nose for no reason. It didn't really do much, unfortunately. And like many ankylosaurids, Euoplocephalus had a club tail, really cool, body armor and spikes. The body armor covered the flanks, so that's like the back legs to like the midsection. And the spikes rose vertically, as you saw in the pictures, from the size of the body, with two larger spikes kind of coming out of the shoulders, which would stop things from biting it. When you're a dinosaur, you don't want to get eaten by other dinosaurs. You don't want that. And it might have also been, in the fun little fact, like how you look at like deer with antlers, it might have not been for defense. It could have been more for like, hey, look at me, I'm a Euoplocephalus, not an Ankylosaurus, because I look a little different. So you never really know. It does change things up. And my last fun fact, because there's not a ton of information about Euoplocephalus that I wanted to put on here, is if you've ever seen a classic Disney movie, Dinosaur, which I loved as a kid, I had it on VHS, Earl, if you remember Earl, that is a Euoplocephalus. So one of the first dinosaurs I ever saw in like an animated setting was a Euoplocephalus, which is really cool. And Earl was like this weird dog, like dinosaur. He barked. It was strange. Yeah, that's Euoplocephalus. So not much to be said there, unfortunately. And our last one is a carnivore as well, which I'm really excited for. So we have Gorgosaurus, meaning fierce lizard. I also didn't mention Edmontosaurus means Edmonton lizard, and Euoplocephalus means well-armored head. And that picture of Gorgosaurus is from Walking with Dinosaurs, which is a Canadian, I guess that's the Canadian version of Walking with Dinosaurs, not like the 1990s one. This is a newer version. And Gorgosaurus is like a big bad. And it was really cool to see a dinosaur documentary tailoring towards only Canadian dinosaurs. So Gorgosaurus means fierce lizard. It was named by Lawrence Lamb in 1914, and the holotype of the species is a very well-preserved skull and nearly complete skeleton found shortly around that time. So finding a nearly complete skeleton, fantastic. Finding a very well-preserved skull, great. It was discovered in Alberta and possibly Montana, we're not entirely sure. And that being said, there's also a big argument where Albertosaurus, we talked about in the first week, might actually be Gorgosaurus or vice versa, because they both look very similar. Some people look at it and say, hey, there's some distinctions. The skulls are different, the brain cavities are different. It just kind of, you have to like look at it with a more discerning eye, and that hasn't been done yet, unfortunately. It lived during the Cambrian of the Cretaceous, about 80 to 73 million years ago, but some sites say 76.6 to 75.1 million years ago. So it wasn't towards the end of the dinosaurs, but it was on a good, it was getting there. Now, it could have grown up to 9 meters long, which is a big dinosaur. 9 meters long, approximately 26 to 30 feet, and weighed up to 2.3 metric tons. Gorgosaurus would have grown slowly like others, so the Tyrannosaurids had this weird thing where they stayed small for a while. The first couple of years, they were kind of small, and they had this wicked growth spurt and got giant. And it happened in the blink of an eye almost. It'd take over a year, and they just double in size, triple in size. Now, with that being said, the growth period means it had to eat a lot. So young Gorgosauruses, we originally thought, I guess you look at the adults, they have longer femurs, but young Gorgosaurus have longer tibia. And longer tibia means you can run. And if you can run, you can catch fast things. So Gorgosaurus, having longer tibia as a young Gorgosaurus and then getting bigger and stronger as an older Gorgosaurus means that it would have been able to hunt faster animals like ornithomimids, so bird mimics. It could have hunted mammals, other small dinosaurs that would have run faster. While Gorgosauruses, the big ones, the adults, would have been big brutes that could have eaten what they wanted to in the area, and they wouldn't really care. So the big difference in size is great because it allows the young to fill one niche while the older ones fill a different niche. When you're much larger than you're young, you don't compete. And like these dinosaurs live for like 30 years, we're assuming, maybe 40, we don't really know. But that's a long time to have to compete with your offspring. And when you don't have that competition, you don't eat your offspring, which means your offspring can get to adulthood easier. And that's a good way to be. So as it kind of roamed North America, it also had a cousin living nearby. And that cousin was Displetosaurus. Now Displetosaurus, I talked about it a couple weeks ago. It's the same size as Gorgosaurus. It's a big dinosaur. They're both big dinosaurs. But Gorgosaurus is more sleek and like graceful. And Displeto is bigger. So in this, you see like the lighter or the darker blue is a young Gorgosaurus. That's a big difference in size. When you're an adult Gorgosaurus, you're much larger than your young. Your young's not going to compete with you. But can you imagine the dark blue growing to the size of the light blue within a year? Like that's an incredible growth spurt. That is, you're tripling in size, tripling in weight, and you're entirely changing your niche. Now, then you look at Displetosaurus, and Displetosaurus already was at that size, and it was a brute. So the one closest, I guess, towards the screen is Gorgosaurus, while the one farther is Displeto. They fill very different niches. Displetosaurus was heavier. It was larger in the sense of being like thicker. So it could have gone after a little bit heftier prey, while Gorgosaurus was probably faster and preyed on, like, I was going to say less armored dinosaurs. So this kind of standoff probably never happened, but literally Miguel from Twitter did a great job of depicting it. So thank you very much for that. And again, they would have filled like different niches, which you want, right? It's been known for many species, making it one of the best represented tyrannosaurids ever, which is fantastic. And we have skin impressions as well. Now the skin impressions are really cool, because the skin impressions showed that it didn't have the large scales, but it also didn't have feathers. That means it kind of had like if you look at featherless birds, that kind of gross, pinky skin, it probably didn't have like that, but it was more towards that than the scales or the feathers, which is really cool when you think about it. And Philip J. Curry found that out. I think it was in 1917. And as I said, like all tyrannosaurids, it had that basic layout. Big head, S-shaped neck, little arms, big legs. That's a T-Rex, so that's what you're going to be for T-Rex. That's all you got to get. It had approximately 60 teeth with some variants. So in Tyrannosaurus, which I didn't know this until today, larger like Tyrannosaurids had less teeth. So the bigger your head, I guess the bigger your teeth, which means less teeth in your head. Now, again, this dinosaur mask shows lots of teeth, but if it was much bigger, it would have had lots of less teeth and bigger teeth that were more like steak knives and such. And my last fun fact, if you ever saw again, The Walking with Dinosaurs, starring Pachyrhinosaurus and Gorgosaurus, it was all Canadian, which is so cool. With that being said, though, we've come to the end. There's tons of information out there. I don't cover it all. I kind of just do like the Coles notes. So I hope you really enjoyed today. Again, in the video description, I'll put the links to what I used. I would love to hear comments about what to do and what I can add to it. With that being said, though, my name is Eldin. Thank you very much for joining me here today on Dino, and I will catch you next time, only live from the Media Hub on riotradio.ca.